The Great War brought about a clashing of the great powers of Europe: France, Germany, Russia, Britain, Italy, and Austria among others. But one state which remained strangely absent was Spain. Spain once stood as the mightiest empire on the planet and ruled the seas well before England had, but by the outbreak of the Great War, the Spanish had been a shadow of the former glory. The country was facing significant challenges on multiple fronts, including political instability, economic troubles, and social unrest. Spain had a history of political instability with frequent changes in government and intervals of conflict between political factions. Perhaps the root of Spain's then contemporary troubles were the Carlist Wars, which contested succession to the Spanish throne between the conservative Carlists and the liberal Cristinos and Republicans. The liberals won time and time again and led Spain down a path toward liberalization and democratization, but instability continued to rock the country, perhaps best exemplified by the continuance of the Carlist power struggle from 1833 to 1872, and arguably until 1939 if we consider the Spanish Civil War a continuance of the larger conservative liberal power struggle within the country. The liberals dominated during the early years of the 20th century with a system known as the Turno Pacifico, essentially alternating power between the Liberal Party and the Liberal Conservative Party, creating a stale establishment which fueled the growth of increasingly radical fringe factions. The ineffective establishment failed to achieve any desirable change for the country, angering not only everyone right and left of the center, but increasingly the average citizen faced with the reality of a country experiencing a decline of prestige, power, and quality of life. The establishment sensed that they were hemorrhaging support and attempted desperately to maintain the delicate system which kept them in power, steering Spain away from any risky international confrontations. Beyond politics, there were grave economic concerns. Spain's economy was struggling in the lead-up to World War I with high levels of unemployment and poverty. The country was slow to reap the benefits of the Industrial Revolution, leaving it with a largely agrarian economy and an industrial capacity that wouldn't have been able to keep up with most of the other great powers. Additionally, strikes, protests, and uprisings took place across the country as the working class was particularly affected by the economic troubles. Poor domestic conditions, a stagnant government, and growing nationalism across Europe also spurred desires for independence from regions of Spain like Catalonia and the Basque Country. Now, this isn't to say that they didn't experience significant effects as a result of the conflict. Spain had been exporting goods to both sides, but the outbreak of hostilities disrupted trade and caused a distinct decline in the country's economy. While industrial parts of the country grew, its agricultural regions suffered shortage, inflation, and unemployment, many fleeing to the urban areas for better opportunities. The divides within Spain further manifested with various factions adopting positions of support for the Central Powers or Entente and Spanish volunteers fighting on both sides of the conflict. Even the Spanish king found himself with familial connections on both sides of the war. The country, had it become involved, could have gone either way at multiple points, having maintained an arrangement with France under the circumstance that Italy sided with the Central Powers, having been harassed by both navies in its efforts to trade with both sides, and having had one of its colonies threatened by the Entente midway through the war. Simply put, Spain was in no shape to involve itself in the Great War, and with likely little to gain from supporting either side, Spain assumed a position of neutrality from the onset and remained neutral for the duration of the war. But what if that changed? What if in an alternate timeline, Spain joined the Central Powers? Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another alternate history scenario for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome and stay tuned. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's donated to us on Patreon, Utreon, and right here on YouTube through channel memberships. Your donations really go a long way to keeping this channel going, and by donating to us across any of these platforms, you'll get access to some great perks including physical merch, a custom designed flag wallpaper, and access to an exclusive members-only Discord server where you can enter your scenarios for a chance to have them made into full videos. You can follow the pop-up on screen here, or go to the comment section or description to visit any of these pages and support our channel, and of course you can do so by clicking the join button right below this video. If you can't donate anything, consider subscribing and sharing this video to help the channel out. Now, back to the video. The year 1916 saw an opportunity for the Spanish to be dragged into the conflict on the side of the Central Powers via the Fernando Po affair, an event in which German soldiers had retreated into Spanish Guinea, which the Allies then considered invading. In our timeline, the affair was diffused and Spain maintained its neutrality, but this time, things are different. The Entente intervention in the Spanish colony brings Spain to clash with the Entente, and following a failure to pressure the Entente into evacuation, would resort to war, bringing Spain onto the side of the Central Powers in late 1916, just months prior to the American entry, and with Germany's support they would successfully liberate the colony from the Allied invasion. Spain's victory in the colony would embolden them and see Spain, with Germany's backing, open a second front for France. The Pyrenees Mountains would offer France some security and lock Spain into two choke points in the northwest and southeast. Meanwhile, the Spanish Navy would engage France in the Mediterranean before being wiped out by the much larger French fleet. While German support would have helped to level the playing field, Spanish forces would still be terribly outmatched by the French. Meanwhile, naval assaults by Britain upon the northern coast would put further strain upon Spain. Had Spain entered the war earlier, their preoccupation of French troops may have been sufficient to turn the tides of the stalemate in Germany's favor, but with American soldiers to supplement and bolster the French line, the Entente holds out, and the French, taking advantage of Spain's pre-war divisions, fuel revolutionary sentiments within Catalonia to further preoccupy the Spanish while focus upon Germany intensified. Even if Spain had entered the war earlier on, the chances of them turning the tides by preoccupying France are still rather low. Spain's small, underdeveloped, and disorganized army and navy would have been no match for French forces, who even prior to full mobilization outnumbered the Spanish forces several times over. This isn't even mentioning that Spain would essentially be surrounded by the Entente and disconnected from the Central Powers, whose strength in part came from their interconnectivity once Bulgaria had joined them and Serbia was pacified. Post-war, Spain would have suffered similar penalties to the other Central Powers, and the nation-states doctrine combined with dissatisfaction from within Spain would likely lead to the creation of an independent Catalonia, Principality of Asturias, and Basque Republic, while Galicia saw integration into Portugal, who had entered the war on the side of the Entente prior to Spain in 1916. Strongly left-wing governments would take hold in the more thoroughly industrialized Catalonia and Asturias, while the Basques saw the rise of a more broadly nationalist government akin to that of Poland. What remained of Spain would be largely conservative and monarchist regions, whose coastline would now be confined to the Mediterranean. Limited in their ability to retake lost land in Europe and without opposing left-wing pull, the Spanish rump state would, upon recovering from the war and pursuing a military modernization campaign, launch full force into carving out a colonial holding in northwest Africa to compensate for their lost land in Europe. Something which had been a goal of the Spanish conservatives since the loss of their far-off colonies to the United States. The rise of communism within Russia might in turn embolden radical elements within Catalonia and force a Western intervention within the country to suppress it, potentially allowing Spain an opportunity to retake some land from that state, but lingering left-wing sympathies could leave Catalonia susceptible to seeing a communist resurgence later down the line. Likewise, as fascism began to arise in Italy, so too would right-wing elements within Spain begin embracing such ideas and adopt an irredentist mindset, potentially launching invasions and annexations of Asturias and the Basque Country alongside Italian and German territorial expansions during the same time. Given these circumstances and having felt wronged by Britain and France, Spain may develop closer ties with Germany and Italy in an alternate Axis alliance. The Spanish Civil War, of course, would not have occurred in this timeline, nor would Francisco Franco have risen to power through military might, though he may still very well assume a position of authority in the country as irredentist and militarist ideals grew in popularity. Spain would have floundered in the First Great War, but given time and the motivation to improve, may find itself better positioned to support the Germans in a Second Great War. But what do you think? What might have happened had Spain joined the Central Powers? Let us know in the comments below. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Mr. Z, out.